Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskar. You have stepped into a course that is going to change the way that you look at data. Not just how you analyze it, but also how you communicate it. My name is Nivid Desai. I serve as the Program Executive at Writing Studio IIT Gandhinagar. Welcome to Writing for Data Science. This course is at the intersection of analysis and communication. As all of us know, data analysis is not just about coding and models. It is about solving real-world problems. And that is exactly why every single thought that goes into solving those problems needs to be communicated. And not just to one audience, across multiple stakeholders. That is where this course comes in. This course prepares you with the foundations of writing, especially curated for data science. We will discuss audience analysis, critical thinking, logical reasoning, as well as storytelling that is native to data science. So join me on a journey at the intersection of numbers and narratives. I'll see you in class. Namaste, hello and welcome to Writing for Data Science. My name is Nivid Desai and we are on a journey to explore the interesting intersections between numbers and narratives. And for that narrative part, we began the final module of our course in the previous lecture, Storytelling with Data. We looked at the importance of thinking about storytelling within data science. We looked at the purpose of narrative thinking and the different components that make a data story. Following on from that conversation, in the second lecture for our module, we are going to look at the foundations and fundamentals of storytelling within data, the structure, the pattern, and the purpose. Now, I understand that when we think about stories, we don't necessarily look at the structure or the kind of formation that may go behind telling a good story. In fact, the point of a good story in Shakespeare's words is to beguile, right? Is to charm us, is to make sure that we enjoy it and not think about structure. But if we are to leverage the kind of power within storytelling, we need to think about the bare bones structure of stories that make them come alive and make them effective. So I understand if hearing a compelling story will not push you to think about structures, but we need to understand that structure is what holds the story together. In data science, storytelling needs to be intentional. A story doesn't necessarily emerge by natural forces. We need to design it in a way that the data tells a story. The story within the data lies dormant, if not for our structure-based intervention. Without a structure, even strong data insights can get lost. Structure is the order and arrangement of information so that the audience can follow the narrative, understand its logic, and reach the intended takeaway. It is a process of discovery that we facilitate with our logical, planned, and deliberate intervention within the raw forms of data. That is why thinking about structure matters within data science and storytelling. Here's an example. Compare these two statements. Revenue dropped 20%. The marketing team launched a campaign. Customer engagement improved. And the second statement is, customer engagement improved after the marketing team launched a campaign, responding to a 20% drop in revenue. The second is structured with cause and effect. Therefore, the structure improves the clarity of what it is trying to communicate. The first sentence is just three statements disjointed from each other with only an implied sense of cause and effect. Even if the sense is implied, it may get lost. So we, as communicators, need to intervene and introduce a causality in a way that becomes clear for our audience to understand. Before we move forward, here's a fun reflection for you. Think of your favorite movie or your favorite book. What made it flow really well? Could you identify a clear beginning, middle, and end? You can think of a potboiler Bollywood movie or an art house French film for all I care. But think about what made it flow really well. Was it something clear that it began, there was a middle part, and then it ended? Can you identify these different components in a story? Think about it, and I will get back to you with the structure of a story. Let us begin by acquainting ourselves with the classical story structure, also known as beginning, middle, and end. The Greek philosopher Aristotle came up with this definition of a story, that a story must have a beginning, a middle, and an end. This is also known as the three-act structure, where the beginning is the setup. It introduces the context and the key characters or the key data. The middle is the conflict or development that highlights the core issue or insight. And the end is the resolution that offers an interpretation, a solution, or a takeaway. If I try to boil down this bare bones structure into a data story, here's a data based example. The beginning can look something like in quarter 1, user signups were consistent across platforms. The middle can be the conflict, but in Q2, Android users dropped by 35%, linked to a new OS update. And the end, with a resolution, comes across as this: fixing UI bugs restored signups in Q3, demonstrating the importance of adaptive testing. If you see, there is a timeline. If you see, there is a causal link. And there is not only an actionable insight, but also a point of relevance and importance for the step being taken to solve the problem. This is a good data story. This is a story thought about through structure. And that is why structures matter. Because in a way, they compel us to think in a logical sequencing pattern that we may not think about if we only approach data at a surface level. Here's an exercise for you. Write a 3-sentence version of a story using the structure: setup, problem, and solution. It doesn't necessarily need to be a data story, don't worry. Any story that you know, could be a fairy tale, could be a fiction story, could be a children's story from your childhood. Break it down in a structure of setup, problem, and solution, otherwise known as beginning, middle, and end. This 3-act structure will help you realize that most stories you and I have often enjoyed adapt this one framework that make it effective and that make them stick with us for a lifetime. Now that we have understood that there is a basic structure for how stories are told, let us now observe some common patterns in data storytelling particularly. Beyond structure, storytelling often follows patterns, meaning repeating formats that help organize thinking. Here are some foundational ones. The first pattern is the problem, cause, solution. This pattern is especially useful in data presentations. The problem asks what went wrong. The cause asks what caused it. And the solution asks what can we recommend. If you follow this pattern, your audience is extremely likely to understand what you mean and what you want to communicate in an instant. Here's an example. Problem is low engagement. The cause is 62% of users did not complete onboarding. Therefore, the solution can be redesign the onboarding to reduce drop-offs. If you arrange your data insights in this particular fashion, your audience is less likely to lose their attention and they will understand the core of your message as quickly as possible. Let me now introduce you to another pattern in data storytelling, also known as the before-after bridge. This pattern works well when persuading for change. Before asks, what was the previous state? After asks, what is the current improved state? And the bridge is what helped the change. For example, if you report in before that only 45% of emails were opened, the after can suggest that opening rates increased to 70%. And the bridge can be about A/B testing subject lines led to improvement. If you think about it, if you are the audience, if the solution is presented at the very last, as in the bridge between before and after, it can help you understand why that solution matters and how it was so effective. If I were to convince you to use A/B testing, this would be the way to do it. Here's a reflection spot. Which of the two patterns do you think is more persuasive? If you were the audience and you were being told both these stories one after the other, which one will convince you better? Why do you think, if you are the audience, that particular type of story will stick with you well? Think about it, and I will get back to you with a third aspect of today's lecture, the purpose in storytelling. In data science, the storytelling is not for a universal singular purpose. People can leverage the power of storytelling for a multiple different purposes. For example, the first purpose can be to inform. The goal can be to help the audience understand what the data shows, as simple as that. For example, a dashboard summary showing sales by region without recommendations. That is only to inform, only to communicate the information. The second purpose can go a step forward. Persuasion, to persuade, to convince somebody. The goal can be to make a case for change, decision, or action. For example, showing that investment in customer support correlates with increased retention. If you communicate this message, your stakeholders are more likely to be convinced about investment in customer support because it directly correlates with the outcome that they want. The third can be to inspire. This last one can be slightly tricky to crack. However, in the following lectures, we will keep exploring how we can leverage our storytelling capacities for all these three different purposes. For now, the third goal to inspire can be to motivate the audience to believe in a vision or a possibility. For example, visualizing the impact of renewable energy growth over a decade to encourage policy support. Now, the decade part can not only be done through data. You have to help them understand and visualize how the future would look like if they are to make policy changes right now. That is the purpose of inspiring your audiences with your capacities of storytelling. Here's an exercise for you. Think of a small data analysis that you have done. Could be within this course or could be outside of it. Rewrite its purpose in one sentence for each of these three goals: inform, persuade, and inspire. Would you be able to mold that data analysis into all three different categories? Try to do it. It is okay if it does not fit within all three of them. Try to go as far as you can, and you will understand just how dynamic your own data analysis can be. Now, a natural question might arise. We have looked at structures, we have looked at purposes. But when do we know which structure to use for which purpose? So let me also bridge that gap for you. Matching the structure to purpose is also methodical. The structure and patterns that you choose should align with your purpose, obviously. If your goal is to inform, then use a neutral structure like chronological or categorical order, something that flows with time or flows with themes can help people understand the information as quickly and easily as possible. If your goal is to persuade, then use the problem solution or before after bridge pattern to build logic and momentum. We have seen while discussing before after bridge as well that it is more likely to convince the audiences for the message that you are trying to communicate. And in the end, if your goal is to inspire, use a visionary arc that shows possibility and growth. We will talk about this more in the upcoming lectures. For example, a team analyzing pollution levels may, to inform, report monthly levels by district. If you see, this is chronological. It is also spatially divided. It is divided by district. And if they are to persuade, they will show rising trends and link to health costs to recommend policy change. And if they are to inspire, they will help you visualize a cleaner city with projections post-intervention. If they are to make changes right now, they should be able to communicate the future to you as effectively as possible. Before we move forward, here's a quick reflection for you. Why do you think an inspiring story can sometimes be more powerful than an informative one? We often talk about how the data and the statistics and pure information can drive change, but can you think of scenarios where an inspiring story can be more powerful than an informative one. I will get back to you with the last exercise for today's lecture very soon. Here's a quick exercise for you before we close today's lecture. Draft a quick story plan for a data set that you have worked with. Define the purpose, as in, do you want to inform, persuade, or inspire? Then choose a pattern, problem solution, before after bridge, etc. Then sketch the structure of beginning, middle, and end. In this way, you will be combining all the three ideas that we have studied in today's lecture: the structure of a story, the pattern of narrative, and the purpose of storytelling. I want to conclude today's lecture by re-emphasizing that storytelling begins with design. Storytelling in data science is not just decoration, it is design. Structure, pattern, and purpose form the foundation of impactful data communication. Understanding these elements empowers the writers to guide audiences through complex data clearly, meaningfully, and memorably. If you leverage this skill really well, you will end up building a perspective while communicating with your audience that will not just inform them, but also persuade and inspire them. That was it from my end for today's lecture. We were looking at the structure, patterns, and purposes of storytelling within data science. In the next lecture, we will look at the science behind why this works. What is the cognition that our audience goes through while reading or listening to a story? We will learn that so that we can leverage that cognition really well for our intents and purposes. Until then, stay curious, keep learning. All the best. I will see you in the next class. Thank you for joining me today. Namaskar.